Hello, everyone, and welcome to the UC San Diego Learning Boost series. This is season 1, episode 8. We're recording on May 6, 2022.
Just kick it off. Are we ready to go? 1 second. She's muted. Okay.
The Learning Boost series is a UC San Diego virtual series of talks introducing you to leaders, dreamers, innovators, and change champions. This series is designed to inspire you with ideas that matter to you and your role, one talk at a time. Today's talk is Removing Our Silos Restores Our Humanity, the special power of mapping and sharing your processes with our champion for continuous improvement, Antonio Nava. We thank you for joining us live today. We really appreciate having you here. Like I said before, we love your engagement. It's so energizing and exciting to hear from you. So we welcome your chat, comments, and questions. And at the end of the talk today, we plan to pose as many as possible to our featured speaker, Antonio Nava. If you're watching the recorded version on YouTube and like what you see and you want more content, then please subscribe to the channel and smash that like button. Now it's time to formally introduce you to our featured speaker, Antonio Nava. He is a champion for continuous improvement, and it is in his mission statement to, quote, develop change agents one continuous improvement at a time, end quote. As a senior strategic initiatives program analyst at Operational Strategic Initiatives, Antonio fulfills this mission through his work with the UC San Diego Process Palooza, Idea Wave campaigns, and managing the Lean Six Sigma program, including acting as its lead facilitator. In 2021, Antonio was nominated by his colleagues and recognized by the UC San Diego Chancellor as an exemplary employee of the year for his innovative and proactive leadership, his inclusive excellence, and extraordinary service to the university and community. He has been a significant partner to the UC San Diego Human Resources team as well, and we're so fortunate to feature him today for Learning Boost series. Welcome, Antonio. I'm handing it off to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming here today. I've never seen a perfect process, but I have seen and felt imperfect ones. Messy processes can play a major role in staff attrition, lack of engagement, and poor deliverables. Now, with so many fires, we want to make things better, right? But what's the first step in process improvement? I believe it's to build a shared understanding of the process, not only with process mapping, but also with introspection, active listening, and empathy. Now, my first grown-up job was with a university in an administrative role. It was very procedure-driven, very policy-driven, very methodical, but siloed. It was so siloed, in fact, that the team that sat in the cubicles next to mine in the exact same role, but serving a different population of students, wouldn't discuss how their processes differed. It's just different. You wouldn't understand. There's more complexity. But was it really, And what about the steps before mine or after mine? Where does this information come from? And why do I fill this form out in this way? And who uses this information and how? And tensions were high between units as each group saw the others as the cause for delays and dysfunctions. Now, I wasn't a business analyst. I didn't know process mapping techniques. I was just an individual contributor hungry for answers. Ultimately, I decided to do something crazy, have a conversation with people from other departments. At the time, we were in an 11-story building, and our use of the elevators was even siloed. The folks stationed on the second and third floors were looked at sideways for being lazy bums if they didn't just use the stairs. The floors 4 to 8 really had an unspoken priority usage of most of the elevators. Although there was a special elevator that sped folks up to the top 3 floors, they bypassed the first 8 floors entirely. To get a real conversation going, I had to do the unthinkable. I had to visit a floor that wasn't my familiar floor 3. Now, the land I had known was relatively quiet. Some chatter, often about policies or transfer credits, fairly bland color palettes. The best way to describe my experience after getting out of the elevator onto the 7th floor was culture shock. From the moment the doors opened onto the 7th floor, I was flooded with the sounds of conversations, music, literal bell ringing, followed by cheers. Even the scents in the air were different. I could smell, wafting pizza and donuts that remained undevoured in the break rooms. It really was jarring. It was like a completely different university. It was then that something clicked in my mind. I was experiencing culture shock because it really was a different culture, right? The organizational culture was a culture in its own, right? It seemed obvious, but for some reason it had eluded me and everyone else there. It was like saying gravity makes things fall, right? We all know it from experience, we live it, but we haven't really thought about it or its implications. A culture has its own language, its own celebration rituals, its own hierarchy, its own art, and apparently so did every floor of that building. I want us to think about if that happens where we are, right? Are you aware of the culture that you're in? If you're a fish, are you aware of the water that's around you, right? That sort of thing. And I started thinking of this as like cultural immersion, right? In the same way that one could take 2 semesters of Spanish class or spend 2 weeks in Mexico, right? I spent time thinking and sitting with folks as they completed their work, simply to hear and observe. I invited them to view my process and hear about my experience if they were interested. And what I did all day, what our frustrations were, how we measured success, and the same for them. I wasn't trying to get them to be like us or change their ways or to judge. I was there to learn and to share. In doing so, we started understanding the why and not just the how for many of our processes. And it made us instantly more effective in each of our roles. Right? Without even doing like process changes, we became better, we became more efficient. We found that sometimes we would use a phrase, and sometimes that same phrase would have a completely different understanding or meaning for a different group. In this policy-focused singular space that was our university, our language was not universal. Returning to my homeland, my coworkers shared that they were literally scared for my safety, fearing that I had been hauled off by angry aggressors from some far-off lands. I'd returned to my quiet workspace, and I'd hear folks grumbling about challenges they were having in the processes, and I began to see how so much of that was caused by misalignment. Assumptions had been made, language was misinterpreted, process waste was rampant. The driver for me was that feeling siloed felt robotic. I felt like a gear. I felt dispensable. I felt disconnected from the mission. I was just there to move the gears of the system, right? And it seemed like everyone else in the workplace was just an other. They were a hindrance, a roadblock, a set of robots, perhaps, who just needed to try harder. We started building these relationships and understanding the cultural differences. We freed ourselves from an us versus them mindset. These were other people who similarly were frustrated and wanted things to get better. We had regained a part of our humanity. We had reclaimed our identities as people doing work, not just as workers, right? I'll rewind the clock back a little bit in my story. My senior year here at UC San Diego with Six College, I participated in a class provided by what was then the Intergroup Relations Program. The class brought together students from varying identities and focused on creating a dialogue. The quarter-long discussions would center around topics like race or gender identity, for example. And this is where I really started to build my foundations, right? Now, in a debate, this is important to understand, you're trying to prove you are right. In an argument, you're trying to prove the other person is wrong. In a dialogue, each participant approaches the discussion with the goal of sharing their experience and learning from each other, right? During the dialogue sessions, we set ground rules, such as only one person speaking at a time. We practice using I statements. We practice active listening. But critically important were these principles: suspending judgment, listening, inquiring, and exploring assumptions. I believe these principles are the foundation for process improvement. Now, sometimes we seek changes in our process because we want to. Our process feels maybe janky, or we want to find better ways. Sometimes we seek change because we have to. Maybe a policy or a legal change forces us to act. But too often, we make hasty changes in isolation, right? We feel like our hair is on fire And that just leads to more process waste, more tension, more relationship suffering, right? We often create new process problems, in turn creating more need for rapid fixes, right? If we take some time to create a dialogue and to generate a shared understanding of our current state, rather than having an argument or a debate aimed at promoting a quick idea, then I think we have a real chance at seeing sustained process changes, process improvements. Larger than that, we'll see culture change. Now, there's many methodologies and approaches to change management and process improvement. In many, most, perhaps all of them, the first step or phase is to develop an understanding of what currently is. I'm going to focus on Lean Six Sigma because it's one of the areas where our office specializes in. I currently teach Lean Six Sigma methodology to staff here at UC San Diego, and I leverage the tools in my projects. The progression of Lean Six Sigma training is similar to the karate system, like the belt system. An introductory is white belt, some practice is yellow belt, and levels progress to green, black, and master black belt with applied projects. Everyone hearing the sound of my voice right now, either in person or on the recording, you're about to get not quite a white belt, maybe a white bracelet, right? And if you're interested in more, we're going to give you, we're going to post information to the classes and other resources afterwards. I just really want to give you a good level setting so I can show you where they all connect, right? So what is Lean Six Sigma? Lean focuses on speeding up a process, not by just going faster, not by sprinting, but by focusing on steps that move the ball forward, right? There's something called value add. It's a very specific definition in the methodology. But we're basically reducing the wasteful impact of steps that don't move the ball forward. Six Sigma focuses on reducing errors, on improving quality. What's really cool about this tool set is that one doesn't have to be at the expense of the other, right? We don't have to slow our process down to get better quality outcomes. We don't have to, sacrifice speed for quality. I mean, you can definitely drive a project that focuses on Lean tools or focuses on Six Sigma tools. But the amazing thing about this methodology is you can have both if you drive towards that. The central themes of the methodology, and I'll say these over and over again, everything we do is a process. No process is perfect. Practice continuous improvement. Don't jump to improve. Build quality into the process and focus on value-added steps. Now, the first, everything we do is a process. This is saying that this tool set can be applied to anything that happens. And so, yes, while it has its roots in manufacturing, UCSD and other campuses and other workplaces have had successful proven outcomes in higher education and health and everywhere else. Not only that, if everything we do is a process, then I can apply these even to personal processes, things like washing the laundry or doing a grocery run, which, by the way, I've applied these tools to my grocery run. I've saved a lovely amount of time on keeping the kids entertained during the grocery store runs. And if we want to chat about that, we can later. But this is a foundational mindset, really. Everything we do is a process. This is the mindset that we want you to adopt, because thinking of it in this way keeps us from feeling like our challenges, our processes are unique in a way that makes them impossible to fix. Like, everything we do is a process, which means that we can apply these tools to anything that is done, which is kind of cool. I think it's cool. Practice continuous improvement. Don't beat yourself up for where you are, but also don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. Like, the analogy here that I often hear is the pebble in the shoe. If I'm hiking, a pebble in my shoe may not seem like a big issue, right? And when we first hit the trail, maybe it takes some time for me to stop, inconvenience everyone for a moment, take this pebble out of my shoe, get it out, and then we can keep on the road, right? There's some additional time spent up front. But how much more bearable will my journey be if I get that pebble out of my shoe, even if it's a small change, right? Don't get stuck aiming for that home run, change the world idea. There's not a best way forward, but there are many better ways. And the best way to reach a massive change is through many small iterative changes. Don't jump to improve. So often we need answers by yesterday. I get that. I hear you. But too often those quick ideas come from brainstorming sessions, and they often miss critical pieces or upstream or downstream impacts, and there's unanticipated challenges. Now, in Lean Six Sigma, there's two. There's DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, control. And PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act. Sometimes you see it as PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. These are basically the phases you would move through when you're navigating a process improvement project. Both start by asking us to dedicate some time to understanding our current state, right? And then we take action, usually on a smaller scale through a pilot, for example. We validate our outcomes, and the final phase is a coordinated effort to maintain the gains. Again, this is really fast, so if this is too much, that's okay. This is your white bracelet, okay? All right, building quality into the process. Now, the worst outcome is for our process to have the end user tell us that we messed up somewhere, right? Whoever our customer is, whoever we're providing our service for, our work, whatever it is, for that person to say, hey, there's an error here, can you go back and fix that? Right? A better outcome would be for us to catch it right before it gets out the gate. Now, this is often what we think of. Let's add a quality assurance step just before we push it out the door, right? Let's do one quick check and QA it. That's better, right, than having the end result be, sent out the door incorrectly. But one step better than that is for the operators in each part of the process, right, as the whatever it is that we're working on is moving through the process, for it to have successive checks, right, little checks that we can then send back. Think about this. If you have an item and it's moved through 15 steps and you QA it at the very end, and the step 1 was wrong, you have to send it back 15 steps. You have to scrap all of the work that was done before that, right? So successive checks are better. Now, the best possible path is to find ways to make it impossible to fail. We're human. We make mistakes. We're fallible, right? That's okay. Think about our processes. How can we build quality into the process to make it so that the process accounts for our fallibility as humans, and we're not just all expected to be perfect, right? Focusing on value-added steps. Now, this is where I talked about moving through a process, but not knowing why, right? In this idea of a maze, I go left and then I go right, and then I go, why? Why do you do those things? The only pieces that are moving you forward towards the goal would be a direct line, right? So is there a possible way to take some of this left and right and make sure that we're always moving in the right direction? Now, it might not always be as clean as this, but this is what we're driving towards, right? When you're looking at a process and you're asking, well, why is this done? And somebody says, well, we've always done it that way, or that's just how I was trained. That's usually a great indicator that there's some process improvement opportunity there, or that there's some waste there. And you can dig into that a little bit. Another way to think about this is if you're looking at a process and you're saying, why do we do this? And they give you kind of a vague notion. You say, well, what happens if we don't do this? Right? Who is impacted and how? And if they say, oh, finance is impacted or HR is impacted, validate that by talking to that other group, right? Building some understanding of, hey, they said this is going to disrupt you. And finance might tell you, no, we haven't looked at that in 4 years. We have some whole new fancy report. I don't know what they're talking about. That sort of thing. Okay, so those are the foundations. Now, this all sounds great, doesn't it? Everyone's excited. But you might be asking, why shouldn't we just go back and brainstorm solutions? Isn't that faster, right, than building this current state understanding or having these dialogues? It feels faster to just, we'll get some people together. I'm glad you brought that up in this interactive experience here, right? Now, my experience prior to joining UCSD and learning about Lean Six Sigma was that leadership wanted to hear solutions, not problems, right? If there was an issue, directors, maybe analysts would meet in a room to brainstorm together. They would make a decision, and that decision would be rolled out to staff. Now, in Lean Six Sigma, staff are asked to examine the current state and create a problem statement to basically tackle the problem head on. Let's all get comfortable stating that there is a problem and agreeing what the problem is. And then let's define and figure out, do some research on what's causing the problem. Then we can measure, analyze, and improve and control, right? So we're moving through plan, do, check, act in the same ways here. And we're saying that to move through this means that we're not going to have additional fires created later. We're actually hopefully addressing the root cause and making sure that those changes stick. Let's say you're still not convinced, right? Let's make it real. Okay, I want everyone to think about a process that they follow in their role. So take a moment, think about a process. Everything we do is a process. What's something that you do in your role? Think about the steps that you move through. What are the resources you leverage? What are the documents or the job aids or the maps? What do you rely on? What do you need to get the job done? How much time does it take? How many of these do you get a week, a year, a month? Is this something that you spend most of your time on, or is this just a tiny, like 1 out of 50 things that you do? Right? You probably came to these details fairly quickly, fairly confidently, right? You have a good sense of the resources and the timing and the volume. So now let's continue thinking about that process. What can you tell me about the person that sits just before you in the process or just after you in the process? How much time does their process take? What are the challenges they experience? What are the resources they have in terms of job aids or videos? How certain were you to the answers to those questions? Right? Now let's move another step. The person before them or the person after, right? If you're going in the opposite direction. It gets murkier and murkier, right? The further away we get, it gets like, I have no idea. Now, what if something they do 2 steps back or 2 steps forward impacts your process, right? Now, I'm not saying that we should all develop knowledge to a point where we can perform the actions. I'm not saying we should all be experts in everything. What I'm suggesting and what I've seen is that we need to invest some amount of effort into process mapping, into dialoguing, into building those relationships, rather than jumping straight to a solution, right? Without thinking about the upstream and downstream. So let's see this in action. I have an example created for you. I created a little scribble map, so please don't judge me. Let me get that set up over here. I'm going to do something a little different. Okay, so I was thinking about the home buying process, right? And if I'm buying a home, if I can afford it, I should be able to apply for the loan, find an agent, tour some homes, make an offer. It should be that straightforward, right? But there's several other people involved in this process, right? There's the seller, there's the agent, there's the lender, there's the seller's agent. And I have a little bit of a sense of what some of them do, right? I know some of the things that they are involved in, but not a whole lot. And I'm not saying that I have to be able to be a lender. That doesn't make any sense. But if I were to talk to my lender and say, well, what kinds of pitfalls do you see other people fall into? What kinds of errors do they make, right? If I could talk to the seller and say, hey, what kinds of fields are typically missed on the application that, hey, you were a good candidate, but you forgot to check this box or that, right? If I had some sense of those pitfalls, it might save my process some time. It might also mean that I end up getting the house that I would have otherwise not gotten. I would have been passed up for, right? Having some sense of what their processes are might be really helpful. But there's even more than that, right? If we zoom out further, I don't know if my agent has a region that they're responsible for. I don't know if the lender is going to some third party and looking at some other credit check place. I don't know if the seller's agent has somebody specifically who works on repairs. I don't know what happens after negotiation and close. What is this title business? No idea. I might be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. I might be wasting tons of stuff. Now let's take a little thought into this process. Let's take a look at the lender process. Let's say the lender does a credit check and they say, we're going to do this process improvement that's going to save our processing team 15 minutes, right? That's great. But what if that means that I, going into the loan application, make some errors, or now it means that I need to take 30 more minutes or that sort of thing. This might mean that I do something wrong and I have to send it back to the lender, or maybe I go through the process and it now makes it look less attractive in some way. Maybe I missed the deadline because I didn't know they made this change and I got to go back into the form. So they've made a change to their process, the lender in the credit check space, that feels efficient, but really has made it so that the seller gets fewer offers on the house, right? Which means they can have less attractive offers to pick from and that sort of thing. So the lender, trying to be efficient in their role, not talking to me, not thinking through the implications of the seller and everything else, might have had negative impacts in that other area. So again, just highlighting this, we hear so often, we don't have time to do this. We just need to put a solution in place and we'll deal about it. We'll deal with it later, right? I'm saying if you have 10 hours of staff time to give to this, do it. I'm saying if you have 30 minutes and that's all that you can devote, do that. It's better than not doing it at all. And it's an investment that pays for itself. But some of you may be thinking, well, mathematically, does it really work out? I mean, if we're spending 5 hours instead of 30 minutes, right? How can this possibly be better? So let's take a look. All right. Here's a fictional process improvement initiative here that we're saying we have brainstormed for 30 minutes with 3 staff. It's a director and 2 analysts or director and 2 financial people. 30 minutes. We did a quick brainstorm. We got an idea together. We're implementing. Now we've made a change. And our change is we're going to add an additional step for staff. We're going to add 5 minutes to this process for every time it's run. Say you have 10 staff and they're each doing it 100 times for every year. So you've got a total of 5,000 minutes you've added to this process. 90 minutes spent on the brainstorm. But now we've got new fires because that field that we changed actually added some other complication that we're going to have to address later. And so we've got another 270 minutes, right, for another brainstorm and then more implications down the way, but we'll pause there. So that's a total 5,360 minutes or 89.33 hours, right? What I'm suggesting is that if you spent more time in define, measure, analyze, improve, control, or plan, do, check, act, or even just mapping, if you just spent additional time on the front end, you wouldn't spend as much time overall. And I'll show you what that looks like. So if you had, let's say 5 hours, more time, way more time in this project, and you took 5 staff instead of just the 3 that you had before. So I'm really trying to balloon it here for you just to prove out the case here, right? Define, measure, analyze takes 1,500 minutes, let's say, but we've saved 5 minutes in our process. So instead of now it taking 5 more minutes to do this process, we were able to find some lean opportunities, which means that we've sharpened our process by 5 minutes. We're now saving 5,000 minutes. We have a control phase. We definitely want to go back and celebrate and make sure things are in alignment. So even if we brought those same 5 staff in for that one, it's 300 minutes. Total here is negative 3,200 minutes. We've saved 53.33 hours, right? We've spent more time up front, but we end up saving. So if you think about that next to each other, right? We're saving a total of 100, or the difference here is 142 hours for a 5-minute change. So if we think about this and say, well, I just need an answer right now, what you're doing is you're costing yourself more overall. Okay, if you take some time to define, to understand, to build this understanding, you're going to create changes that are system efficiencies rather than point efficiencies, right? And the example I gave earlier with the lender, they felt like that was going to be really efficient for them. That was a point efficiency. It didn't actually fix the overall workflow of the system. All right, so let me come back into my PowerPoint slides here. Coming back to the real world here. Okay, so you might be asking, all right, I'm on board. I believe you. How can I do this? Right? What can I do about it? Do I have to learn a new software? Do I have to take some training in some expensive class? No. Well, not necessarily, right? The best thing you can do, if the best thing you can do is to have an informal discussion with a few peers and scribble some notes on a piece of paper, then do that, right? But do so with these foundational concepts in mind. Your goal is not to convince others to act upon a specific solution, but to develop an understanding of what currently is happening and to use that understanding to craft a path forward, right? Sometimes this can be just through open discussion, although Lean Six Sigma strongly promotes taking time to observe the process, literally go to where the process is being done and spend some time there, right? The cultural immersion that I was talking about earlier. Now, when it comes to mapping, use whatever tool is best. So if you are familiar with Lucidcharts and ProMaps, that's great. By the way, both of these are available for UC San Diego staff with no cost. So Lucidchart and ProMap are both available to staff for mapping use. And maybe I'm a little bit biased, I am the trainer and administrator for ProMap as well. So if you are interested in ProMap, you also get me as individualized support. So we'll post links for that in the chat in case you're interested as well. Again, no charge for that. But let's say you only have comfortability or time or resource, what have you, for a Word document, right? You just want to put some bullets on a document. That's fine. Do that, right? I'd even advocate for a napkin with crayon written on it. It's more important that you capture the information and share it out than that you don't have anything to start with at all, right? Scan your napkin and send it to people who do this process, right? Get some more insight and share the insight that you gain from doing having these conversations, right? Please don't get stalled feeling like you won't have a polished final artifact. Okay, remember, it's about reaching a better state, right? There is no best. There's only better. We want to get better. And if right now we have nothing in terms of documentation and our understanding, then having something, anything would be better than that, right? So what can you do today? Like, what are your specific actions today? So remember, first and foremost, it's about a mindset, not a specific tool set. Okay, so I know I talked about Lean Six Sigma, but if you have another process improvement methodology that you prefer, go for it. The goal here is to really focus on the front end of making sure that you're validating your assumptions, that you're going in with an open mind, that you're sharing information, right? Think about a process that you do. Maybe this is something you can do today. Think about a process that you do and reach out to the person, somebody who sits a step or two before or after you're part of the process. Just have a conversation. Ask what their steps are. Ask what their day is like. Don't approach the conversation with a specific change in mind, right? Offer insights about your experience if they're open to that. You can also practice mapping in any of the tools available. If you choose to, like, what I'd say is find a mapping tool or find a scribble set or find a Word document and just practice. Write out a process map for doing the laundry, right? Or going to the store. Practice using the tools so that when it comes to the time when you are with a person, when I'm with Linda and we're mapping out a process, right, that I have some practice using what the tool sets are so that I can more quickly get around those technological challenges if we're having any. Now, when you're looking at the documentation, when you're sharing, like, I have these resources or I have those, try to think of it from the mindset of, does this make sense to me where I sit? Would this make sense to someone else, right? If I have a standard operating procedure and this text all makes perfect sense to me, but when I hand it to literally anyone else in any other area, they go, this looks like a completely different language. That's because it kind of is. Remembering the cultural component there, right? You might have to rethink some of the resources, right, and create them with the appropriate tone for that audience, right, with the appropriate verbiage that will the right level of detail that will resonate with them. And then, of course, if you want to attend formal trainings, you are more than welcome to. There are tons. There's other videos like this one that you're currently either participating in or listening to if you're doing the recorded session, right? There's a lot of stuff, free stuff online that is available for you to go and consume, right? There's also there's events like Process Palooza, communities of practice like BCOP, the Business Excellence Community of Practice here at UC San Diego. There are networks. I would encourage you to reach out to them because they're might be thinking through some of the same things, and you can practice with those groups and you can gain best practices and tips and that sort of thing. So I really want you to take home that I hope that you will examine your processes, that you'll learn about them, that you'll share about them before going to make a process improvement. Making a process map is like telling a story. You can't tell your story without some introspection, right? And your story isn't yours alone. The stories of your teammates, your departments around you, the faculty, everyone had a role in this ultra complex organism we call the workplace. There's a student today sitting in their dorm, completely unaware of the role you played in their life. But whether you processed the travel reimbursements, secured a grant, updated a website, sent an email, scheduled a meeting, you're a part of their story. Let's remove the silos that reinforce our disconnection from our shared mission. Tell your story. It's as easy as that. Learn from the stories of others. That's how we'll reclaim our humanity. My goal today was hopefully to inspire you to start your process improvement journey, to share some useful mindsets and hopefully help you navigate a challenge. Don't jump to improve. Think of your starting point as a dialogue, not a debate, as a journey, not a destination. We can't move mountains on our own, but we can change the world together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. That was really eye-opening. I have been collecting questions in the chat, and I'm going to put the first one in there. You invited it, so I'll put it in there. Question 1, how do you apply it to a grocery run?
Okay, so there's a tool called the spaghetti diagram, right? We're looking for motion and transportation waste. And then what I did was, I'll actually show you, why not? Okay, so here's, everyone can see my screen, right? In a spaghetti diagram, you basically draw out your the layout of the location where the work is being done. And let's say this is the different aisles of the grocery store. And then you put pencil to paper and you say, track the movement of the process. So go down aisle 1, I get my groceries. Oh my goodness, I forgot about something over here. Great, I move back. and it started to see, okay, and then I get to the end of the row. Great, now I'm gonna go get in line. Oh no, we forgot something in the milk aisle. Oh, we also forgot bananas. Oh, and then we gotta get this thing over here. This is what my process ended up looking like, and it was a mess, right? So one of the tools here is to say, draw out that mess and think about what's causing the amount of rework. So how come I had to go back to this space, or how come I abandoned the line here? Had to, what did I forget at these points, right? What was the cause of missing those particular steps, and how can I make this process more efficient? So I looked at my process. My process included creating a grocery list, and then based on what was needed in the house, and then I'd go to the store and I would shop based on that list. I realized that my list would be much better suited if it was in the order of the store. So what I do is I write down my list, and it takes a couple minutes, right? Every time I make my list, it takes a couple minutes for me to then retranscribe that to be in the order of the store. But I've been to Food for Less and Ralph's enough times, I know where their milk and their grocery and whatever it is. So I write the list in the order of the store. So as I'm walking through the location, let me use a different color for this one. As I'm walking through the location now, I can literally go and then be done with it, right? It saves me a lot of time when I go to the store to not have to go do the rework of I missed 4 or 5 things in different aisles. And this is super, super helpful when I have an 11-year-old and a 6-year-old who are clamoring for technology and saying, oh, I don't want to walk anymore. So yes, it takes an extra 2 or so minutes when I'm at home, but it saves me 20 minutes when I'm out with kids in shopping carts. So that's how that project went for that particular initiative.
So is that the same thing you did for the laundry then?
No, the laundry had more to do with looking at the process. So the process for the laundry is you get your laundry, you put it in the bin, right? Bin, and then you need to sort it, right? And then you can wash it based on if it's whites or delicates or what have you. Eliminated the sorting step by having the bins be whites or colors or delicates. So there's 3 different bins. So now we don't have to sort anymore. So save myself time of pouring the stuff out on the floor and whatever. I still have to depirate things. We call them depirate when you turn them inside out, right? Because when you take off your socks, they get stuck. So we call it depirating in the family. But I don't have to go, this is white and this is that, and put it in different bins because they're already in different bins.
Thank you. We have another question.
You're muted, or the audio is just not coming through.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, so there's another question. It is,
Sure.
Is ProMap available to UC San Diego health staff? If yes,
it is available.
Advise.
Yes, it is available to all UC San Diego staff. It's basically available to all UC staff for the most part. It's a system-wide license, and there are implementations in, I think, UCLA, UC Davis, UC Santa Barbara, UC San Diego, and I think there's a couple other campuses that are coming on. It is available. Let me put the link to ProMap in the chat here. Here we go. And so there's more information for that. I'm sorry, I cut off your question. Was there more to that question?
Yes, it was. How do you? I think it was. If yes, please advise how staff can obtain it. So I think you're saying go to that website.
I'm saying go to that website, but I'm going to show you one other thing that's really cool, just because I have a captive audience, right? Okay, so there is this map. I'm going to also put it in the chat. This is something called a mini mode map. It's basically a lightweight version of the map that people can see but not change, which is lovely when you're sharing it out with a bunch of people. This is a map about how to gain access to ProMap. So just a little interactive tool here. So you've got the map view and you've got the procedure view. And these are the top level boxes and who's responsible for them. And if you click on the box, you can also expand it out to see some little sort of FAQ type things, as well as the resources that are needed for that particular step. So very cool, very easy to build. There's videos here that you can also watch in the prepare for the training step. So I put that in the chat. You can go to the Blink page, or you can go to the map itself, both of which have the guide for you to learn how to gain access, et cetera, et cetera.
So you've given this example on this page because you've mapped out the process.
I've mapped out the process of how to gain access to, oh, this is the yellow belt one. I apologize. Give me 1 second. I grabbed the yellow belt link instead of the ProMap link. So that was, sorry. So this is the map. The one that I put in was how to participate in yellow belt. This one is the one for gaining access to ProMap. I apologize. This is the ProMap map. I was zooming in a couple different windows, pardon the Dan pun. For this one, for ProMap, you register for the session, and the link to register is in here. Where is it? Come on, ProMap, don't make me a liar. So the registration link is here. It's in step B. There's a couple other bits of information. The specific training dates are posted here. I need to update this because it's got an old date on it. We just finished the training class, so I apologize for that. But yeah, so we have additional sessions. Oh, and then for both ProMap as well as Yellow Belt, if any groups wanted to do an individualized session for their teams, we're also available for that.
Okay, thank you. So that leads very naturally into the next question.
Okay.
Put that in the chat. It's how do I convince my team to start a dialogue? What do I say? Because you're just mentioning bring the whole team, but that might be an awkward conversation.
Sure. If there's a natural opportunity to start a dialogue, if there's like a team meeting or something, and you just want to, like, during the awkward silence go, so like, tell me a bit about your day, like what does it look like, or I want to know more about this particular step. It's much more natural to have a one-on-one, I think. So if you have an ally, let's say you close the snow ticket and somebody said, hey, happy to help whenever, that sort of thing, maybe email them or put back in the chat, hey, do you mind if I set up a 15-minute Zoom, like just so I can learn more about this. I've done that a number of times, even with things like requisitions and placing orders in OFC. That's something that's very I'm not familiar with it, but I've developed a couple great alliances with folks, and it's really just about I want to learn a little bit more. Maybe approach it from that sense. I would like to learn more about what your day is like. I want to learn a little bit more about this process, not so that I'm not asking you to do this thing for me. Right? I'm not saying, hey, can you go and process this requisition for me. I want to learn more about what do people trip on. I want to make sure that I don't trip on those tripwires, right? I want to learn more about what are the pain points, what are the things that if I just knew this, right? So often in our role, we're like, man, if everyone just knew that this KBA existed, if everyone just knew that this video existed, right? What is that thing? Because I want to learn more about that. I want this process to be improved. I want this relationship to be better. But then take that to your team, right? And then you can share that information. Say, hey, I had a conversation with so-and-so in XYZ department, and they shared this resource with me. It's really made me so much more efficient and confident in this particular thing. So if you are also putting in requisitions or what have you, know that that's available for you there, right? So now you're magnifying the impact that one-on-one conversation had.
So would you recommend then starting at work, or is it kind of recommended to start with at home or with a friend? Like, how does someone get started if they're eager to, but your training is not available yet?
In terms of what, process mapping, or in terms of dialoguing? I mean, I know they're both related, but I want to make sure we're sharp in the answer there.
Well, what's the difference?
Okay, so if you're creating a dialogue, right, if you're just learning more, it's so that you can gain an understanding of the cultural differences between your experience and theirs. If you're process mapping, it's so that you can have a document or a resource to rely on or to share with others to sharpen the actual execution of the process, right? And then you use that relationship, that dialogue along with that map to then say, great, now if it's appropriate, we can embark on a process improvement discussion, right? The dialogue and the mapping should happen first. And if you have this, I want to fix this thing, or I have this problem, great, you can have that and you can share that. But I really strongly encourage you, as you're going through it, to have an open mind for any of the solutions that could potentially come up in your conversations. Because if you're really focused on, you get that tunnel vision, you really focus on a particular solution. We're gonna, use this system, and we're gonna tell this other department that they have to do XYZ step. Maybe there's a reason that wouldn't work for them, right? Maybe there's something more elegant, like, well, do we need to do this step at all? I can't tell you the number of times that I've participated in a process and we're like, we need to fix the way this is done, XYZ thing. And then I go to ask people, so like, what do you use that report for? And they go, we don't. We used to. It used to be really relevant and important, but without that conversation, right, we're fixing a problem, a perceived problem that we can't all agree was a problem to begin with, and maybe shouldn't have been, something that we should be tackling. So if you have ideas for solutions, those are great. They will come up. It's natural. Document those, capture them. But it's really important that when you're going through the planning phase of PDSA or the define phase of DMAIC, or any other the starting phases for any of the other methodologies that you are sort of couching for the moment, what you think the solution will be, and you're focusing wholeheartedly on learning more about the experience and sharing about what your steps are and that sort of thing. So the question I think was, should you start professionally or at home? I would say start personally. Start with a personal relationship that you've had with someone, either in your family or in your friendship circle and that sort of thing. Those are much more natural, much more comfortable, much maybe less heated and politically weighted, I would say. But it also gives you an opportunity to practice, right? It gives you an opportunity to say, am I using I statements, right? Am I speaking, did I make an assumption there? Did I jump to improve, right? It will take some time to do that. I'm thinking of myself right now. I use a lot of ums when I'm speaking not from a script. And one thing that Toastmaster says is to be more aware of your ums, like do a little counter or an ah counter, find out what your word is. That's kind of what I'm challenging folks to do now, is as you go and you have those conversations, look for the times when you're jumping to improve and you don't realize it, right? When you're saying, well, why don't you do this? That's jumping to improve. You ask, what is it you currently move through? What have you tried in the past? What has been unsuccessful? Maybe the idea that you thought was going to be a surefire shot is something that they tried, or is something that they moved away from previously, and for what reason? So it really is about sort of gaining information, sharing information at that phase. And if it's more comfortable for you to start with personal relationships, I strongly encourage that. Get practice. Okay?
All right, thank you. And then one last question.
Let's see, one last question, but I don't hear one last question.
Okay, one last question. What if people are afraid that mapping the process will lead others to blame them for not being efficient? So that idea around mapping it will reveal maybe what you're doing is not worthwhile, and then taking it personally.
Okay. Mapping is always worthwhile. Building this understanding is always worthwhile. Even if you don't make a process improvement, having that understanding is totally worth it. In terms of other people placing blame, I think that's a cultural thing that we all need to work on. And I hope that that's part of what Lean Six Sigma is doing, right? Is making us comfortable with problem statements, and the dialogue that we create should help address some of that, right? It should help dispel some of the idea that, this is that person's fault or this person's responsibility. It should help in terms of, and it has, in terms of saying, we understand now more what's going on. It removes the us versus them. It puts a face, right, to the humanity. And the dehumanizing part of it is when we say, oh, that's their fault. Really, who are they, right? And how is it their fault? Like, did they wake up today and say, what we're going to do is we're going to break this process? I don't think so. And I haven't never seen that, right? It's more often than not, it's people trying their best to do their best with the resources that they have. They're often experiencing the same frustrations that we are, that the process has a lot of waste in it, that there are steps that they're not sure add value or move the ball forward, that there's policies that they're restricted by, that they wish they had 10 more people in their office because then they would be caught up. There's so much of that we can connect on. And if we can agree upon what currently is, then that's the first step towards moving towards what can be better. So there's a lot there to unpack. And there's a lot of change management and strong leadership that comes with it, hopefully. But part of what we're trying to do with Lean Six Sigma specifically is provide this kind of training out to as many folks as possible. The same with the mapping, right? Get that out as much as possible so that we can start to change this mindset away from, it's not my fault, but it is my problem, right? It's not something that I caused or that you caused, but it is something that we can fix, right? I'm hopeful that the culture will shift, and it can only shift, when we all do it together when we all start rowing. And it's I've heard the analogy of a large ship, right? If you're gonna turn a large ship, you have to do it several kilometers in advance, right? Because it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of time, and it doesn't feel often like the ship is actually turning, but it really is. And even in my 3 or so years that I've been, 4 years that I've been here at UC San Diego, I've seen and I've felt the cultural impact that having this sort of tool set and this mindset can have. And that's why I was more than excited that Linda invited me to speak on this topic and hopefully share it with more people as well.
Well, we feel very, very fortunate that you were here today. We were able to ask lots of questions and you've given us a lot to think about. So I want to thank you for being here today. Thank you for joining us live. Also, everyone in the audience, if you have questions after the talk, then please feel free to email us at staffeducation@ucsd.edu. And in closing, I want to remind everyone that the UC San Diego Learning Boost series is here for you to learn, to give you a small and mighty learning boost. It's also here for you to leverage, to inspire you to leverage inspiration into bite-sized risk-taking, and here for you to lead the way towards richer and more meaningful conversations. You are the connection point between an idea and a philosophy and a practice. All right.